My guest today trained as a barrister, got called to the bar, and then never practiced a single day of law. Instead, he joined a startup with 4 employees, helped grow it from almost nothing to 1 million in recurring revenue, and sold it. That acquisition put him inside Litera, and over the next 6 years, he went through 23 acquisitions, not two, not five, 23. New leadership, new products, new territories, a move from the UK to New York, a change of private equity ownership. And through all of it, he was building and scaling sales teams across the world. There were nights he was sleeping on his office chair, alarm set for 1:30 in the morning, and up for a demo to a Magic Circle law firm at 2 a.m., back to sleep, up again at 6 when his team started calling. And then he walked away from all of it, left Litera on December the 31st and started at a startup called Lupl on January the 2nd. No break, no gap, straight into building a go-to-market from scratch with a fraction of the people and none of the brand. In this conversation, Ab talks about the difference between true product market fit and false product market fit, and why most startups are living in the second one without realizing it. He explains why every dollar is not equal and why saying yes to the wrong customer can cost you more than saying no to revenue entirely. He shares why he believes that when you are having a really good day in sales, you are actually getting rejected more, not less. And he says something that I think every sales leader needs to hear, that not being successful should feel like an unreasonable outcome. Not because you got lucky, but because you put in so much work that any other result just would not make sense. This is Ab Saraswat, CRO at Lupl, and this is taking LegalTech to market. Ab, so you trained as a barrister, got called to the bar, and then never practiced. Walk through that decision. What made you look at the legal profession from the inside and think, actually, I want to sell to these people rather than be one of them?
So, like most salespeople, I think it was purely accidental. So, I'm a bit of a techie, a bit of a nerd, and and I was working after I did the bar in a large organization, and as I was looking at roles and what I could do in the future, which pupillage was one of the options, I came across a startup called Xref at that time, now acquired by Litera, and the founders are doing great things. I was like, well, I'm a nerd. I'm a lawyer now too. This legal tech thing sounds interesting. And at that point of my life, I was also surrounded by a lot of people who were either working on a startup or were thinking about that. And it just seemed like a cool, interesting thing to do. And at that point in my career, it made sense to at least go in and take the jump. Um, the process was fascinating because I didn't know anything about startups. So everything from the interview through to working there, and when I joined, we were a tiny company. So I'm glad I made that decision. Um, and I think once I started working inside of a startup, which was selling to lawyers, I also realized, I'm having way too much fun on this side than I would on the practice side. And also, quite frankly, most of the lawyers I spoke to um, had questions on why did you do this? I wish I did that. I wish I could do that now. So a lot of the people who were practicing wanted to stop and didn't want to go down that path. Um, and it was just so much fun. I think, sales and marketing and success and just managing every aspect of that business was so much more interesting. And I feel like I learned probably 10 years worth in 2 years, just doing that. Um, and yeah, it just filled me with energy. So I stuck with it.
Yeah, love it. And with Xref, you were employee number 3 or 4, and you grew it from near zero to about 1 million and ARR, and led that to an exit. Then that acquisition puts you inside Litera. Did you choose LegalTech, or did LegalTech choose you?
Um, I don't know. I think a bit of both, I guess. And I will say, as much as in a startup, there's no one person who sort of grows anything to anything. So definitely
Sure.
fully a team effort in all of those aspects. I think it was the right moment at the right time. That's probably the best thing I can say. Different period of my life, different worlds. I could have taken path B, and that would have been really interesting too. But I think very much legal tech chose me just because it was at the beginning of what was legal tech at that stage, and there weren't that many providers at that point. And we're talking about 10 years ago now. And if you look at the technology landscape 10 years ago to what it is now, right, there were definitely not um, hundreds of millions being invested into technology or into legal technology as there are now. There weren't as many startups at that point. There weren't as many people just generally starting businesses. You could, if you go to a conference, you would know who the main vendors were. And you had some of the companies like Raven, like Xref, and a few others that were emerging as, interesting new additions to the world. Um, but there weren't that many. And I think the novelty factor of it all um, both made it a challenge because you still had to convince people that actually you should, look at this sort of small company that no one's ever heard of, which is every startup's problem always, over something that firms were developing at that point themselves, right? The challenges that we had at that point wasn't so much there were so many competitors in the market, but it's that firms were still in that build mode and they were still into, no, it's fine, we can do that. And we had weird conversations about sort of on-prem work and all of these things that are, they still happen, but cloud adoption is up there. Some firms are still thinking about it, which is bizarre. But we were at this sort of changing time for legal, and it was a lucky break for me personally, because I don't think I could predict that. But it just happened, and I just wanted to, surf that wave as much as I could and as long as I could.
And you went through 23 acquisitions at Litera. I don't think that's a typo for my notes. I think that's what you actually told me. 23. So that's ownership changes, leadership changes, role changes. What did going through that level of M&A teach you about sales teams that many people will never be able to learn?
Yeah, and someone at Litera listening to this can probably validate that number for me. But of course, uh, it was a lot. So in the years post acquisition of Xref by what was Microsystems back then, so not only did I get to experience going through so many different M&As, but also experience going from one PE to another PE. And all of these things meant that your role is changing quite rapidly. You know, the biggest change I would say was actually the initial sale of Xref to Microsystems, because we went from being a small team to being part of a much larger company. Large is a relative term here because we were 10, 11 people going into a company that was 80 people. So, still 8x bigger than us. And they were competing with us at that point. So, you went from someone you're head to head in a lot of these bake-offs to having to work with them. And that was a fun experience. I loved the people there. And then as that acquisition, that roll up started, um, the culture changes very dramatically. You go from 80 to 200 to 500 to thousands plus. There's multiple layers that get created, and there's also so much more to learn and do, right? Initially, even the initial Xref microsystems, yes, microsystem had multiple products, one of which was a competitor. So that was an easy enough thing to understand. Then they had other products that were so much more technical. And as a seller, you want to understand the other products, but you also realize that actually you're going from a product that's sold to the users, which was what Xref did, um, or to a product that's sold to a technical stakeholder. And your worldview has to change completely with that. You have to learn to work with sales engineers and specialists who can answer these very specific technical questions, about documents, about metadata, about all of these different things that frankly I had no idea about. I didn't know half of these words were. And then as you go with the organization, grow with the organization, looking back, I'm also thinking about, how much I just had no idea. I had thankfully managed people before I joined Xref, so at least I could lead a team and I could do that. But I'd never managed a sales team before. I didn't know how to run QBRs, quarterly business reviews. I didn't know how to think about comp design. I didn't know how to talk through all of these acronyms that were suddenly being sort of thrown at us, like CAC and ARR and NRR and all of these different things when you move into bigger organizations that people think about, being able to be structured around business units and having, CS people, sales engineers, solutions architects, and all of these roles that are, second nature to me now. It was kind of just learning through just being thrown in the deep end constantly. And because of the acquisition, that world just kept changing so rapidly. So it did feel for a point that every 6 months or so, it would be a different company altogether, right? You have huge lines of business that get added. A competitor that was a competitor once is no longer a competitor. So how you position in the market isn't so much we're better. You might be better, but now they're part of the company that you're working for. So what's your pitch? You also have to work through selling multiple different platforms. So you think about bundling, you think about not just new logos, but you also think about cross sells and upsells and all of this.
I mean, that pace of change, could you embrace that, or was there a part of you thinking, oh, here we go again?
I mean, I guess I did because I was there and I lasted for that long. I honestly, I loved it. I loved it. I am very grateful for the time I went through. It's not the same experience that everyone else had. And I think if you speak to 10 people, you may get 10 different answers. But I loved all of it. Don't get me wrong, there were absolutely moments and times it was extremely stressful. But I still vividly remember periods of that time where I was probably working the hardest I've ever done in my life. And I loved every second of it. There were times where I was leading the international team, which is essentially anything outside of North America. I had moved to New York at this stage from the UK, and my team was selling into, APAC. They were selling into obviously UK, Europe. They were selling into South America. And there were times I was on calls with clients and, leading calls, doing demos at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So I would, go to sleep on my office chair like this after I finish a call at 11 p.m. And this seems really unhealthy, and it probably was, by the way, so not advised. And I would just lie back and I would have my headphones over my head, and my laptop would be on. My alarm would go off at 1:30. I would just wake up, get a shot of coffee, and okay, be ready to do a demo to a stakeholder. as a magic circle firm or something like that at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you just go back to sleep, and then you wake up again at 6 a.m. when my Teams would ring in my ear. Again, would I want to do that all the time? Absolutely not. But I had such a good team and we were on a roll. So I just wanted to just ride that wave and just keep the momentum going as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, obviously, that's not a healthy way to live, but that being that locked into something is just such a beautiful thing, and do it. And it's, you can't, someone on the outside, it's hard to explain that kind of thing being enjoyable, but it is, you get a buzz out of it. But
Yeah.
let's fast forward to Lupl. So
Yeah.
when we talked about Lupl before, you said to me the company was at that stage where you were being, when you joined, that the company, you were being pulled in 100 different directions, so talking to anyone and everyone. So walk me through what you did to focus that go to market motion. Like, what did you say no to? What did that cost you in the short term, and what did that result in?
Yeah, and I think this is again just common patterns and problems that you see in most startups, which is you want to get to product market fit, right? You want to have that. You want to know who are we selling to, who wants to buy this, where do we have sort of this concrete solution to a problem we've identified. And I think there is true product market fit, which is when you're able to execute a repeatable playbook. And then there is almost a false product market fit where you're selling, but what you're selling isn't a repeatable pattern, and it's different for every customer. And I think that's where Lupl was. So they were certainly having, you know, they were having success and they were having good conversations in the market, but they were also doing the things that every startup does, and frankly, even mature companies do, which is someone wants to talk to us, let's talk to us. And people forget that every dollar isn't equal. The relative effort to obtain that dollar, that to close that deal, may not be worth the time in the long term. And in the short term, you may want to go down that path from a learning point of view, from validating, or actually from being able to exclude whether that's the right thing or not. And a big part of what I came in and put into place was, let's go after a specific market, and that's the law firm market, and specifically the large law firm market for us. Um, I did not want to spend so much time going after in-house, going after government, going after anyone, to go after small firms or solos, um, because A, we're a small team, and B, the positioning, the sale is very different. You go after, even let's say you exclude everything except for law firms, how you sell to a law firm that's in the bracket of 1 to 10 lawyers or 10 to 25 lawyers, it's so different to selling to to law firms that are 50, 100 plus lawyers, because for one, at the smaller end of the scale, you have to remember you're not just positioning your product. A lot of the time, you're actually walking people through how to buy technology. Now that's changing a little bit now, but at that point, that was definitely a case. And when you're a small team and you're trying to move quickly, and you have a product that isn't displacing something directly, so people aren't just making a decision based on, okay, well, we already have this, shall we upgrade? They're deciding on a new type of tool, admittedly for legal, not the world. You don't want to spend so much time just educating them on how to buy. You want to spend the time on educating on why to buy. And you can only do that if they already know how to buy. So they have that process. And now it's just, hey, by the way, this is the problem that we solve. This is what you get. Or actually, what I prefer more, instead of the ROI, you talk about the COI, the cost of inaction. By not doing this, this is what is costing you or the business. So the individual or the business problem.
I read something you wrote that the biggest problem in legal tech isn't the technology, it's the execution. And I think the argument was that vendors are the bottleneck sometimes, not the lawyers. You're a vendor. Tell me a bit more about that.
I don't remember when I wrote that, but probably. So I do think vendors can be a bottleneck at times. It depends. And it depends on the relationship and the partnership that you have with your customers. Um, as you think about the world today, I think there's a spectrum in how you can partner with your customers and your prospects. You have on one side just a very transactional relationship. And by the way, I'm not saying that's not good. For certain types of things, you have a commodity product, you want to have a transactional relationship. You have to move quickly and you're trying to do things at scale. And there's not that much nuance to it, right? I don't know, someone needs a solution to have calls like this. Let's just get through that, right? We can almost sort of transact on that. Then you have the solution selling in the middle, which has a whole spectrum within a spectrum kind of thing, where you are going through identifying specific use cases, identifying problems, and you're trying to figure out what needs to happen. This is where I think vendors can become a bottleneck because you need to get out of your own way sometimes too. You need to know when the sale is done and ask for the sale. It's too easy to keep going down the path of let's solution this further, let's keep going further. And I think that's moving more into, for some companies, this sort of idea of having a forward deployed engineer, FDE, which is a lot more and sort of more um, I guess, common technologies, but that means that you've partnered with a customer and then you essentially embedding with them to make rapid improvements to the product, right? So you do have to figure out where on the spectrum you want to be um, and what kind of relationship you have. Some are much more resource intensive than otherwise. And I think where vendors need to be mindful is how do we deliver value quickly? And for some tools, it's really easy. For some tools, it's actually difficult because there's a lot of implementation. So I won't pick on anyone in legal, but if you think about something like a Salesforce, right, you may decide to buy a Salesforce across and amongst their lots and lots of competitors that they have. But you're not up and running with Salesforce overnight. There's a heavy and large implementation contract that comes with it. So, how can you make that process easier for the customer? How can you make it so they can start giving access to some people initially? Because traditionally, what happens is you buy something like that, and if you're lucky, 12 months later, people are starting to use it, depending on the resources. And you've already spent at least as much as you did on the subscription on services and implementation, right? Sometimes more. So, how can you architect it so things happen faster? People actually get value. There's something for the stakeholders, right? Because what you don't want is someone in the business, whichever business you're selling into, saying, I remember approving the purchase of X. What's going on with that? It's been 2 years. And this, I think we all know of stories like that in legal and otherwise. That's been the case. So, how do you get out of that way? Because it has an impact on the relationship. And as a seller, and a seller in a company that may have multiple products, guess what? If I've already sold you something and it's going to take you 2 years to implement it, it's really difficult for me to come back to you and say, hey, do you want to buy this other product too before the implementation is done? Right? Even if that other product may be something that's quick to value, maybe has low implementation or no implementation, you do have to then think about, okay, the order in which to do this, or hopefully there's different stakeholders involved. So you do have to start becoming much more strategic in your approach. But I don't know what I meant by that when I wrote that article, but that's at least what I'm thinking today.
Yeah, love it. Obviously, we're all talking about AI right now. Certainly, every legal tech company is talking about AI. I know you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges for any legal tech firm is cutting through the noise that's being made by a Harvey or Legora or these companies that are closing seven-figure deals in a single day. How do you do that? How do you cut through the noise at Lupl and make sure you stand out when it is so competitive and there is just this incredible bubble happening right now?
Yeah, I think so. That I'll approach that with two ways. One is how do we do that internally so people are focused and we just get things done, and that's a process point, which
Mm,
is you have to trust in the process, right? Yes, there is, you have your big behemoths in the market that are creating and producing a lot of interest, and firms are looking at that, and you just have to know where you fit in, where you may overlap, where you are distinguished, and where you're just a completely different category. Because you need to know those things so you can, again, educate your customers or just converse with your customers about that. Internally, it's also just putting your blinders on, right? Just because someone announces that they had a week where they close $1 million every day of that week, as a company that's raised hundreds of millions of dollars, sure, that's great. We can't get distracted from that, right? Our goals are our goals. They're not, you're always going to be in a situation where someone's going to be ahead of you and people are going to be behind you. So you got to just keep looking forward and just keep moving and just keep putting in the work. I'm a big, big believer in just consistently showing up and doing the work, and you will get there. Work you want to work in a way where, frankly, not being successful is just a unreasonable outcome because you put in so much work and you put in the right work. um, and you have to do that. So that's one thing. And then in terms of the market, I think where you can, you have to leverage the trends. You have to leverage what other people are talking about. You have to try and create partnerships where possible. And again, you have to come prepared with these conversations with the stakeholders. So you have an opinion. I think you have to be opinionated, especially when you're smaller. You should be opinionated, right? I have an opinion on what I think is going to happen in the future. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if I'm going to be right or not, but it's much better to be opinionated than just sit in the middle on the fence on, I don't know, here's six different options. Is going to be one of those. Well, yeah, of course. It's going to be one of those six. What do you think? Right. And in our conversations, in my conversations with law firm leaders, that's a discussion that we're having, which is, well, what do you think? Right? What are your views? You're looking at this from a business transformation point of view. I'm looking at it as a business transformation person. This is what I think. These are some of the variables in play. And it's likely it's going to end up like this in the next 12 months, in the next 24 months. And people value that. So, so much of that, it just comes down to the fundamentals: provide value, um, market, and just keep following the process. I think it's easy for people to get discouraged and stop doing the basics, which is do outreach, create content, share insights, have good conversations, follow up, right? And the number of deals that are closed and lost just because someone doesn't follow up, it's astounding. So
mm.
don't let the noise just distract you. Just get locked in, get keep doing what you're doing and just follow that process, and be smart, right? And following the process doesn't mean this has always worked for me. I'm always going to do this. I'm going to reach out to the person I've known for the last 50 years. No, you got to change with the market. If through all of this Gen AI stuff, it creates new opportunities because suddenly those partners that previously didn't care about technology are now asking for it. Great, you have a whole new audience to tap into that you may not have otherwise. So leverage it, utilize it, and be respectful about it. But it's being able to adapt as well as just keeping your head down and just keep going.
I think it's a good time to ask then about that actual sales motion you have today at Lupl in terms of outbound, inbound, partnerships, product led. What does it look like now, and how has that evolved in the last 3 years?
So we're very outbound focused. We do have a inbound motion, but my view in inbound is unless you are spending a lot of time, effort, and money on trying to nurture things that would generate inbound, um, it's not something that you have full control of. And generally, you don't have full control of inbound, right? It's inbound. You don't get to control who's going to reach out to you. Um, and inbound is definitely a flywheel if you can crack it, where if you can get enough interest from customers, you can build a community around that product. That does happen. And so we do okay there. I don't think we're great, but we definitely invest more in our outbound effort. And also because we're in the stage for the category that we're in, work management, we also still have to have those conversations to educate and make our users aware. So outbound works a lot better because it can serve as both, let's capture interest, but also in doing so, let's share why you might need this. I know you may not be thinking about this today, but I bet you're doing this kind of work in this way. And there are so many opportunities and so many things that you can get out of digitizing and making this better. So our motion is very much outbound focused. We are very mindful of working and going after the end users. So we want to have concrete use cases, right? It's not just, hey, do you want to buy this thing? It's got AI in it. It's these are specific use cases based on different practices, and how you can leverage them within the firm. Then it's a matter of, okay, great, that this is helpful. It's understanding who the budget holders are, who the decision makers are, and then going to them with, hey, by the way, here are some use cases we heard from your users. Um, this is how and the benefits that they can derive by using the platform and the product. Can we talk about the process? Right? You do have to respect and understand and sometimes challenge the decision making process, because yeah, people will say, look, our budget is set for this year in February. Does that mean that for the next 10 months you're not doing anything? No, like there should be things that you're working on, right? Where are opportunities that you can create something that may be discretionary? What are other firms that you can work with? So we do a lot of that. And then in terms of product led, our product team and engineering team are amazing. They're just frankly amazing. So we ship at incredible speed. And of course, our product roadmap is driven both by our opinions on what we think the market needs, and also largely by prospects and customers as people are using the product on this is what needs to happen. And because we can ship at incredible speeds, we get to surprise and delight users. It's really big for me. I want the number of times that I get on a call, they're like, wow, we didn't expect to hear from you now. That's what I want to hear, right? Someone sends us an email as an inbound. There's no reason that they shouldn't hear from us within an hour of that. I don't see why not, right? So if they haven't already booked a time with us, they have a question in the hour, just get back to them. It's crazy. And people are like, wow, we didn't expect to hear from you. Great. Because usually people are waiting for days, if not weeks. It's wild to me. Same thing from a product perspective. The number of times we hear, it's like, wow, I can't believe that you guys already added this, or this looks amazing. I was on a call with a partner yesterday. He saw the product in December, and he saw the product yesterday, and he said, this is wild. Everything that we spoke about in December, that's already in the product and more. I can't believe that you guys were able to add this in. So it's definitely that partnership. And I think we have, probably unbiased, we have the fastest customer to product market and feedback channel in anyone in legal tech. Right? We have a conversation with a customer. I can tell you, especially if my note taker's in the meeting, within 15 minutes of that call ending, the product team has detailed notes on exactly what was requested, any stories and epics and all that things that come from that, and they're already looking at it. that's just how quickly we want to be able to move. And that creates and sets us up for incredible success. And it also gives the customers confidence that actually they care, they listen to us. They're not just saying, okay, cool, we've added it to the roadmap, right? We've consistently delivered on this is on our roadmap. We said it's going to come out now. Hey, guess what? We actually released it a week before, or at least on time.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, you need good people around you to do everything you've just talked about there. When you're shaping or building a go-to-market team, what are you looking for in this space? What are the traits of people who can successfully sell to your ICP that you tend to go for?
Actually, my answer for what I look for is largely unchanged depending on the size that we are, or when I was hiring at Litera, or when I, refer people. There's some fundamental characteristics that I'm looking for in essentially sellers, um, and then other people too. And then there's some variables depending on the size of the business and the complexity of the sale and everything else. But overall, the things I value most over anything is, do people have the grit and the work ethic that it takes? I shared the story. I don't expect people to do what I do, right? I don't expect people to work, 60 hours, 80 hours a week, all the time. It's just not good. Don't do it. But, sales and selling is definitely one of the very few things where your input has a very strong direct correlation to the output. Um, and I want sellers who want to have the best output. They want to be the best. And there's a number of different ways that people can demonstrate that. And it's okay if you haven't done sales for the longest time. Prove that you are consistent in showing up, that you want to be very good, whether you have a hobby and you're obsessed with just getting better. You're a gamer and you want to, win all the time, or you play sports and you want to be the top of your form. Doesn't mean that you're an Olympian, but do you want to put in the work and the effort it takes and have the discipline to improve day after day, week after week? Those people will win generally way more over just innate talent and skill. I feel, because they're willing to put in the time and effort to learn as things change. So I definitely look for that beyond anything else. And two is just, can you demonstrate that you've gone through difficult things and want to keep going, right? In sales, for sure, your life is just full of rejections. And I love saying this because I think it's true. When I have a really good day, I get rejected more often than when I have a bad day, because it means I've reached more people than I would otherwise. But guess what? I've been doing this for a while. When I cold call, when I speak to people on demos, when you just get rejected, it doesn't get any better or easier, right? It's still I love what I do. I believe in the product, and it it hurts me when people say no. Thankfully, it's mostly not right now, but still. And can you just show that you're going to just shake that off after you hang up the phone, right? Take your 15 seconds, pick yourself up. Okay, next dial. So you need to be able to demonstrate that in some way, and it's challenging if you haven't done this before, um, but there are different ways that you can prove that. And I think in startups, specifically for startups, I love people who have a chip on their shoulder. They're just so good. you know it's me against the world. I'm going to prove you all wrong. Those people are just stellar. And I think about the best people I've worked with in my career, everyone from AEs or SDRs all the way up to sort of sales directors and CEOs. All of us, all of us have had some sort of chip on the shoulder to be like, I know you don't believe in me. I'm going to prove you wrong. And it's not just, to put it out there as like a mean thing. It's that internal thing. It's that fire that you have. And it's so hard to find people like that. But when you do, my God, those people are amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say those words, chip on the shoulder. I think for me, when hiring salespeople, or for myself, or for customers, it's always about that Why? Why are they going to put themselves through this? Why are they going to get those rejections? Why do they need it? And often it comes down to some kind of chip on the shoulder. But if you could, I guess, another question I have for you, if you could go back to that first month back at Lupl, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
Well, so number one, I made a mistake in I did not take a break between leaving Litera and starting Lupl. I finished
Right.
at Litera on December 31st and I started at Lupl on Jan 2nd. So that would definitely be something I would do different. I would take at least 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
That's an easy cop out answer. I think the other thing I would do, I dove in very much immediately and quickly. I think I would probably wait a little bit longer before going after some of the larger accounts and doing demos and stuff. Um, my demos at that point, a month in, were fine because I was familiar with the product. I spent a lot of time focused on that. But because the product was changing, I think waiting in that rare instance another 6 months with some of those accounts would have been better because essentially what you end up doing otherwise is going back to those people and they've already formed an image of what you do and who you are, and then you have to redo that to say, hey, by the way, we've changed so dramatically, so radically that what you remember, just forget. And it's just easier to not have to do that and just start fresh. Of course, you don't want to sit and wait, but I think I could have divided those accounts a little bit better than I had done in that time. But I didn't know how quickly the product was going to change. So hindsight and all, it's easy to say that now.
Certainly is. It certainly is. And if we look forward to this next 12 months, I guess final question for me is, I know there's a North Star number for the whole team, which you're all bought into, and you don't need to share what that number is, but hitting that number, to hit that number, what do you have to do differently from what you're doing today to get there?
I think we just need to be more focused. Honestly, I think the team is definitely focused around that North Star metric. It's the thing that we live and breathe every single day. I stare at it daily, multiple times a day, and I think it's just making sure that we don't get distracted. That's probably the most important thing, right? We have to just stay on track. This is what we need to do. We know in order to get there, this is part A, B, and C that we can take. Let's stick with it, right? And A, B, and C because there's lots of things that are outside of our control in path A and B and C. And to get to that point is going to be some mixture of A, B, and C. But we have to just stay focused, not get distracted by everything else happening in the market, and just think about is what we're thinking about doing is how I'm spending my time and my team is spending my time. Is this going to help us achieve this outcome? Or is it not? And if it's not, then 99% of the time, the answer should be let's not spend time on it. There are exceptions, of course, especially for me and some other people in leadership. We have to do other things too. But for the most part, if this is not helping us as a company, as a business get to this outcome, let's not focus on it right now. And it's hard sometimes to remember that because something comes along, it's shiny, it's fun, everyone's talking about it, but you have to just go back to the fundamentals, right? This is a goal. Is this helping us or is not?
Well, I'll be rooting for you and the team to hit that North Star number, but I appreciate you taking some time out to talk to me today on taking LegalTech to market. But I better let you go. You've got work to do, you've got a number to hit. So thank you so much for being a part of this show.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on.